Hello, and welcome to week 5 of Assessment in Psychopathology, Spring 2025. This week that we're wrapping up, you've been learning about disorders typically diagnosed in childhood. And it's a lot of information to cover, but hopefully you got a good overview with a little deeper dive into a few of the disorders and the process of diagnosis. Again, many of these disorders that we think of as being diagnosed in childhood, whether intellectual disabilities or neurodiverse disorders or autism and ADHD, are not things that you likely will be diagnosing, but that doesn't mean you won't be working with people with these disorders. It'll be part of the process of helping people access diagnosis. So it's really important to understand that. The percentage of people being diagnosed with autism in particular has increased tremendously over the last 20 to 30 years. And it's not people with what we used to call more severe autism. Those are not the numbers that are changing so much. It's more the sort of level 1. Again, the language changes frequently, so talk to your people, be up to date as you can with the language. But the people who are have less severity, in terms of how it affects their ability to function on a day-to-day basis, that's the category of people where we're seeing a significant increase. I want to say like 30%. I'm going to look that statistic up and get back to you on that. But I just heard it recently at a conference that the number of people being diagnosed on the spectrum or with autism or as autistic, depending on the language that you're using, has increased significantly. And we could speculate all day long about why that is. I would venture to guess some of it is just that we're getting a more accurate idea of what it really looks like, and we're realizing that not as many people are neurotypical as we have previously believed. And so we're really seeing that there's much more variety in the way that people's brains work. So hopefully that means we will get better at designing our systems to be more adaptable to lots of different ways of learning and thinking and functioning. So hopefully you found the information helpful. You had really, when I looked a couple of hours ago and read through your responses, and a good 3/4 of you had responded by that point. There were a lot of similar responses in terms of finding symptoms or markers of ADHD in Kyle, who was the case that you read about. And several of you brought up the importance of taking a broader view, not just presuming, pre-adolescent boy must have ADHD, right? He's acting up, must be ADHD. And it's possible. I don't know Kyle. Kyle isn't a real person. He's a made-up case. But, presumably Kyle was diagnosed over a period of years with ADHD, so it could be accurate. It also could be, related to PTSD. There wasn't enough in the description to tell us whether he has other PTSD symptoms for us to be able to rule that out. But it's a really, really important question to be asking. What else could be going on with this kid? I think one of the benefits that we have when we work with people over time is that we can get a more accurate view. And I'll be honest and say that I've had clients that I've worked with for years who some more information was presented and we realized we totally missed things that they were dealing with because we weren't looking for it. So, being open to not just pigeonholing people. Hopefully that's your big takeaway from this class in general, is that you're not just pigeonholing people into one diagnostic category, but you're really looking at the whole picture. So those are my kind of wrap-up thoughts from week 4. And as we get into week 5, we're looking at schizophrenia or schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorders. Most of the content is around schizophrenia. Part of that is I think it's more frequently diagnosed than some of the other disorders. We have more information. We've been studying and learning about it for longer than some of the other psychotic disorders. But it's important for you to go through the content and read, at least the overview descriptions of all of the disorders, and you'll have a chance at the end to kind of compare and contrast some of the different disorders. there's so much to know. I mean, you really could take such a deep dive, even just with schizophrenia. But my hope is that you will start to demystify it a little bit, whether or not you have had the opportunity to meet, and Dr. Mowbray will say some of this in the many lectures, whether or not you've had the opportunity to meet somebody with schizophrenia. They're people, right? They're people who are trying to live their lives, and some of them, some people with schizophrenia are able to live pretty, normal is not a great word, but they're able to live full, rich, meaningful lives with relationships and activities and things that they care about, and lives driven by their own values, and putting their time and energy into things that they care about. And other people have more severity and more barriers, because of their symptomology, or depending on when it was caught, how early they were, how young they were when the onset happened, the severity, the social supports that they have, the kind of treatment that they've gotten, those kinds of things, affect outcomes and affect what their lives look like. It is my hope that you will take the time to watch the video that's at the very end of the module, that I think I labeled it encouraging video, about people or folks in recovery. It's a hopeful video that in contrast to John Ratliff, who you will watch videos about, these are people who have gotten supports and treatment really early and are living, really full lives with lots of connections and lots of supports, and doing things, that are important to them, and making a difference and helping other people. So hopefully you'll take the time to watch that video at the end, so you can see kind of the range. Somebody who has lived his entire, John Ratliff, who you'll learn about, who has lived his whole adult life essentially without treatment and gotten very, completely disconnected from his family, versus these folks who are talked about at the end, most of whom I believe are in, or maybe all of whom are in Georgia, who are connected, and they have relationships with their families, and their families are supportive, and their outcomes have the potential, over the long haul, to be much better. So I just wanted to say that, this is one of those disorders that has so much stigma around it, and it's referenced a couple of times throughout the content this week. Very often they're linked to fears about violence and fears about harming other people, but there's so much stigma around schizophrenia, and I'm not interested in making it out to be this heroic thing where we should treat people with schizophrenia like they're so brave. While some of them are, you don't want to turn it into that kind of hero worship or hero, objectification of people with this disorder. But I have known some really lovely, wonderful, caring, great people with schizophrenia. And I think I was really intimidated by it when I first started getting into clinical work, and I was working in community mental health, or had initially had my internship in community mental health. And then worked in community mental health for several years after I finished my MSW. And it's intimidating, right? And to a certain extent, people need specialized care, but connection at all, support at all. CBT is considered one of the, cognitive behavioral therapy is considered one of the approaches to schizophrenia. And, there are, obviously, not everything works for everybody, but there are really solid medical interventions that are available for people with schizophrenia, and they work better for some people than others. But there are treatments available. So I hope that you will, it'll be just demystified a little bit for you. I don't want to take too long, but I did want to tell one story about when it may have been the very first person that I did an intake and assessment on as an intern on my own, without watching my supervisor do the intake. And this was a very long time ago, and I'm changing some of the details, so there's no way you could identify the person. But it was a person that came in who I initially, walking out of the intake, was thinking that this person had a psychotic disorder. And my wonderful, wonderful supervisor sat me down and said, okay, well, let's look at the DSM. And I was the DSM-4 TR at the time, but let's look at the DSM and let's talk about why, what are you picking up on that you're thinking that this is a psychotic disorder? And as we worked through it, she gently led me to realize that I was assuming, because it was probably the first time I had sat and talked to somebody with active psychosis, that I was being a little alarmist. And really, this person had, I assume, tons of trauma, but they had major depressive disorder with psychotic features. So just remember that psychosis can be connected to a lot of things. Psychosis can be from medical issues. Psychosis can be a drug reaction. Psychosis can happen when you have had insomnia for days on end. And there's a lot of different things that can cause people to have psychosis. And I'll talk in a second about what psychosis is, because that can be very much demystified. But I saw the psychosis and I thought schizophrenia. And I was learning, I was a student. I was probably in this class at the time. And so I realized that this person had, we eventually realized that the person had probably borderline intellectual functioning, lived in really awful circumstances, and was routinely kind of terrorized, small t terrorized by adult siblings also living in the house. Spent a whole lot of time dissociating, which again, as my supervisor said, if I lived in that environment, I'd probably dissociate a lot too, just to survive. It was actually kind of a coping skill to just disassociate with this person. Not that we recommend disassociation, dissociation as a way of coping, but sometimes that's exactly what it is. People need to tune out to survive the things that they have to tolerate. So the person had borderline intellectual functioning, lots of dissociation, and major depression, lots of trauma, but they had psychotic features. Again, psychotic features, hallucinations, delusions, paranoia are the main ones. We hear psychosis or psychotic, and people who don't have education in this stuff tend to think we're talking about like some scary axe murderer. But they really are just a certain set of symptoms that are caused by, brain chemistry that is out of whack. That is not a technical term, but their brain chemistry is off. Too much or too little of certain chemicals can create these symptoms that people experience, and they're scary for the people experiencing them. As a matter of fact, another professor who teaches this class links a video. It's all audio, but it is a video on YouTube of an example of what it's like to experience audio hallucinations. You can Google it, or you can check on YouTube for it if you want to. It's pretty distressing, so I didn't link it. But it's not fun. So approaching people with psychotic disorders with wisdom and compassion is just really important, and I will encourage you to do that. I learned a lot from that first client that I assessed. It really flipped the way that I thought about psychosis. Just in terms of having more understanding of it being not a character trait, but a symptom of a disorder, of a lot of different disorders. So I hope that you will find this informative and helpful. I hope that as you watch the various videos, that what you will see is human beings who have a pretty serious illness that they're coping with, and that they'll cope with their whole life because there's no cure. But human beings nonetheless, who deserve to be treated with respect and compassion, but also caution, to make sure that we're not, we want to take people's concerns seriously and make sure that we're really assertively diagnosing and seeking treatment for people so that they don't have to suffer needlessly. So those are my 2 cents, many more than 2 cents, on schizophrenia and on the process of starting to learn to make sense of some of these disorders. I hope you find it helpful. I hope you'll let me know if you have questions, and I will see you all next week.